At 72 years old, I stood outside the home I had worked my whole life to build. My hands shook as I held a single suitcase, the kind you carry when you don't know if you're leaving for a night or forever. My own son, the boy I raised through hunger and long factory shifts in Ohio, locked the door behind me and smiled like it was nothing. His wife stood beside him, arms folded, with that smug grin that cut deeper than a knife. "Great if you're out by the weekend," he said, cheerful like he was giving me a gift, not taking my whole life away. "Before we continue, I ask you now, what would you have done if the family you gave your blood, your bones, and your soul to turned you into a stranger overnight? Would you swallow your pride and leave quietly, or would you stand and fight for the dignity they tried to strip from you? Tell me in the comments, because this story, this betrayal, is not one you will forget. I had no warning, no gentle words, no moment to prepare my heart. One day I was mom, the woman who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Next, I was an inconvenience in their home. "You can take the guest room or move out," my daughter-in-law had said, eyes sparkling as my son drove up in his shiny new car. I thought she was joking, but her smile told me she wasn't. That night, as I carried my belongings out under the cold Ohio sky, neighbors peeked through their curtains. Nobody came to ask questions. Nobody came to help. Do you know the loneliness of walking away from your own front porch, child? It is a silence you never forget. But let me tell you something. Betrayal does not end when the door slams. Sometimes that's where it begins. And sometimes the ones who betray you learn that pushing you out doesn't free them. It curses them. When I left, they thought they had won. My son thought his new car and his proud little wife were worth more than the mother who raised him. But I knew something they did not. I knew the truth about what she was hiding. And soon, her smug little smile would vanish. Panic would take its place. Now listen closely, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It is about sacrifice, heartbreak, and the kind of revenge only wisdom can bring. I will tell you everything. The nights I spent working double shifts, the secrets I uncovered, and the moment I decided I would no longer stay silent. You see, wisdom grows sharper with age. And when family turns their back on you, sometimes wisdom is the sharpest knife you'll ever hold. So lean in, child. Comment below what you think I should have done that night. Because the truth is, what I chose to do changed everything. For them. For me. For the future of my family. And this is where the story begins. That night was the beginning. The night their betrayal lit a fire in me they never saw coming. The door did not close softly. It slammed. Hard. Final. The sound rang in my chest like a gunshot. I stood there, one hand still on the rusty railing of the porch, a single suitcase at my feet. The air was sharp and cold, though it was late spring. That slam froze me. It told me something words could not. I was no longer welcome. I turned back, half expecting my son to open it again, to tell me it was a mistake, to hug me like he did when he was a boy with scraped knees. But no. The curtain moved, a shadow crossed the window, and then silence. I wasn't mom anymore. I was a guest overstaying my welcome. My daughter-in-law's words still echoed in my ears. "You can take the guest room or move out." Her voice sweet as syrup, but her eyes were knives. She stood beside my son like she had already won a battle. My boy, the one I carried 9 months in my belly and 25 years on my back, had nodded at her words like they were law. And then he added cheerfully, like tossing crumbs to a bird, "Great if you're out by the weekend." My knees shook. I gripped the railing tighter. The ground beneath me felt like it was slipping away. Out by the weekend. Do you know what it feels like to be pushed out of your own blood's house? To have the child you sacrificed everything for to turn your years of love into an eviction notice? Child, it cuts deeper than poverty. It hurts worse than hunger. That night, I didn't cry in front of them. No. I held my chin high, though my heart was splintering. Pride is the only weapon the poor and old still carry. If you lose that, you lose everything. So I walked, step by step, suitcase bumping against my leg, down the porch, across the little walkway I'd once planted roses beside. Those roses had bloomed for years, watered by my hands, but that night they might as well have been thorns cutting into my skin. Behind me, silence. No voice calling me back, no door opening again, only that slam ringing in my ears like a cruel farewell. I reached the streetlight at the corner, stood under its yellow glow. I looked back once. The house was dark now, like I had never lived there at all. My son's shiny new car was parked proudly in the driveway, gleaming under the moon. It felt like the house and the car had replaced me, like I had been traded in for something newer, shinier. I whispered to myself, "Is this how it ends?" But even as I said it, another voice whispered back, a voice that had lived inside me through every hardship of my life. "No, this is not the end. This is the beginning." I walked on. My bag was heavy, my body old, and my heart torn. But my mind began to burn. That slam had woken something in me, something I thought had died long ago, because betrayal is a fire, and once it's lit, child, it doesn't go out easy. When that door slammed behind me, I thought I had lost my home, but soon they would lose much more. I remember the day too clearly. It began with the sound of an engine, loud, proud. It rolled into the driveway like it owned the street. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out onto the porch. There it was, shiny, red, new, a car that sparkled like the sun. My son stepped out, grinning ear to ear. My boy, my only boy, his chest puffed up, his keys jingling in his hand like trophies. His wife followed, her heels clicking against the pavement, her eyes sliding to me with that look I had come to know too well. Cold, measuring. "Mom," he said, his voice cheerful. "What do you think?" "Nice, huh?" I smiled faintly, though my heart twisted. Not because of the car, child. No, I was happy for him. He had what I could never give him. But there was something in his smile, something I couldn't name. It wasn't the smile of a son sharing joy with his mother. It was the smile of a man showing off, proving something. To me, to the neighborhood, to himself. His wife slipped her arm through his, her fingers curling around his elbow like she had just won a prize. She tilted her head and said, sweet as poison, "Oh, don't look so surprised. We've been saving for this. A new chapter, a fresh start." Then she looked me up and down. My old apron, my worn slippers, my gray hair tied back, and that smile. Oh, that smile. It cuts deeper than words. I had lived long enough to read faces. Her smile wasn't pride. It was victory. That night, it became clear what she meant. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded across her chest. My son leaned against the doorway, still jingling those new car keys. And she said it. Soft, sweet, cruel. "You can take the guest room or move out." My heart stopped. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She said it like she was offering me a choice, but her smile told me it wasn't a choice at all. And then my son, added cheerfully, "Great if you're out by the weekend." Do you understand, child, the kind of wound those words carve into a mother's heart? I fed him when I went hungry. I worked nights when my back screamed for rest. I sent him to college when I barely had money for rent. And he stood there, smiling as though my place in his life was less permanent than a set of shiny car keys. The betrayal wasn't in his words. It wasn't even in hers. It was in that smile, that smug, careless smile she wore as if she had already taken everything that was mine. And in that moment, I knew something. This was not about a room. This was not about space. This was about pushing me out, removing me, erasing me. It was her smile, her smug, careless smile, that told me this betrayal was only the beginning. Child, let me ask you something. Have you ever given your whole life to someone who forgot you? Have you ever poured yourself out until there was nothing left, only to watch the one you raised look at you like a stranger? That is the weight I carry. I raised my son alone in Ohio. His father was gone before the boy was old enough to speak his name. It was me, only me. I worked double shifts in a factory where the machines screamed louder than the voices in my head. I would come home with grease on my hands, the smell of metal in my hair, and still find the strength to cook his dinner. There were nights I didn't eat so that he could have seconds. My body shrank, but he grew strong. Winters were the hardest. I remember patching the holes in his coat with scraps from my own. My shoes had cracks that let the snow in, but I saved for his boots. He walked to school warm. I walked to work cold. When he was sick, I sat by his bed all night, whispering prayers into the darkness, begging God to spare the only thing I had. And when he was well, I walked to the corner store and bought him candy, even if it meant no bread for me. Every birthday, I wrapped gifts in old newspapers because I couldn't afford the shiny paper other children had. He never noticed. He would tear through the wrapping, his eyes glowing at the small toy inside. That glow was my reward. And school. Oh, child, school was everything. I took extra hours, scrubbed other people's floors, and sold my wedding ring so that tuition was never late. I told myself, if he has education, he will never suffer like me. That was my dream, to lift him higher even if I was sinking lower. And people told me, Margaret, you are strong, but strength has a price. Every wrinkle on my face, every ache in my bones, every lonely night in that one-bedroom apartment, it was all part of the price I paid. And for what? To see him standing in my kitchen, jingling his car keys, smiling as his wife told me to move out. It's funny, isn't it? I gave him everything, my time, my health, my love. I gave him the life I never had. And yet, in the end, I was the one who was disposable. But what I learned later was that while I worked to give him everything, he was planning to take everything from me. I didn't leave with anger. I left with silence. The guest room they offered me was not a home. It was a warning. And when I heard the cheer in my son's voice as he said, "Great if you're out by the weekend," I knew he had already erased me from his plans. So I packed, slowly and carefully, my life reduced to a few worn dresses, folded into an old suitcase that still carried the smell of mothballs. The photos I kept, black and white, edges frayed, slid into a small envelope. That was all I allowed myself. No furniture, no keepsakes, not even the quilt I had sewn with my own hands. She watched me from the doorway as I packed, her arms crossed, her smile thin and satisfied. My son didn't even stay. He left in that shiny new car, the sound of the engine drowning out the sound of my breaking heart. When the door shut behind me, it wasn't just wood and hinges. It was bloodlines. It was history. And it closed on me as if I had never belonged there. I dragged my suitcase down the steps, each thud against the wood ringing in my ears like a drum of humiliation. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction, but inside my chest burned with a pain I cannot describe. That night, I found a room to rent. Small, dark, a single window with glass so thin the wind whistled through it. The walls were bare, chipped with paint that curled like old skin. The bed creaked when I sat down, its thin mattress no softer than the floor. I stared at those walls, 4 of them. That was all I had now, 4 walls and silence. Do you know what silence does, child? It forces you to listen, not to the world, not to people, but to yourself. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I had given them everything. They had taken everything, but they had not taken my will. That night, staring at 4 bare walls, I made a vow, one they would never see coming. When you are young, revenge feels like fire, hot, fast. It burns everything, even you. But when you are old, revenge feels different. It is not fire. It is ice. It waits. It watches. And when the time comes, it strikes in silence. Lying in that rented room, with the wind creeping through the cracks, I thought about everything I had given. Every meal, every dollar, every hour of my life poured into my son's future. And how quickly he had traded it for a car, a smile, and a woman's approval. Tell me, child, if you had raised someone with your bare hands, would you accept being tossed aside like yesterday's paper? Or would you demand the respect you had earned? My mind replayed their faces. My son's cheerful grin as he told me to be gone by the weekend. My daughter-in-law's smug smile, lips pressed tight as if she had finally won a long war. Their voices rang in my ears like a chorus of betrayal. At first, I prayed. I asked God to soften their hearts, to remind them of blood and sacrifice. But as the nights grew longer and the silence heavier, another voice rose inside me, a voice that did not beg, a voice that promised. They thought age had made me weak. They thought I was powerless with no weapon left but tears. But I had something stronger than both of them. I had time. I had patience. And I had the truth. Revenge isn't always about shouting. Sometimes it's about waiting. And I knew their time would come. It had been weeks since I'd seen a familiar face. Loneliness presses down heavier than hunger. So when Clara, my old neighbor from the church choir, found me at the corner store in Dayton, my heart lifted. "Margaret," she said, eyes wide, "Lord have mercy. I thought you were gone for good." Her hug was soft, the kind that reminded me of Sunday mornings and potlucks. For a brief moment, I felt like myself again, not a castaway, not a mother thrown out, but simply a woman who still belongs somewhere. We sat on a bench outside with paper cups of coffee. She asked where I was living now, and I told her about the rented room, trying to keep my voice steady. But Clara was not fooled. She held my hand the way only an old friend can, when words aren't enough. "I shouldn't say this," she whispered after a pause, "but you need to know." Her tone shifted, softer, lower, as if the wind itself could carry her words back to the wrong ears. She leaned closer. "Your daughter-in-law, Melissa, she isn't what she pretends to be. Folks around town have been talking. She's up to her neck in debt, credit cards, loans, even whispers of money she owes to some people you don't want to cross." The warmth of her hand suddenly felt like ice. I blinked, searching her face for some sign she was mistaken, but Clara's eyes were steady, grim. All at once, my daughter-in-law's smug smile returned in my mind, only now, behind it, I saw something else. Desperation. And when she told me what my daughter-in-law was hiding, my blood ran cold. Clara's words followed me for days. They clung to me at night, whispering in the silence, urging me to look deeper. I told myself it was gossip, small-town chatter, but in my bones, I knew it was more. So one afternoon, I returned to the house I once called home. I had kept a spare key hidden under the chipped flower pot by the porch steps, a habit from years when I feared my boy might lock himself out. Funny, isn't it? That same key would one day open a door to truths they never wanted me to see. The house was quiet. Their new car sat proudly in the driveway, gleaming like a trophy. Inside, the air smelled of lavender spray, too sweet, too staged. I moved carefully, each step a prayer they wouldn't return too soon. I went straight to the bedroom. Melissa's vanity drawers were full of receipts, makeup kits, jewelry boxes, but it was the bottom drawer of the desk in the study that caught my eye. It stuck halfway, like something was crammed too tightly inside. My hands shook as I tugged it open. Folders, envelopes, bills stacked high like bricks of shame, credit card statements with numbers circled in red, overdue notices stamped bold, letters from collection agencies in Cleveland and Columbus, words sharp as knives, final warning, immediate payment required. And then, buried beneath the stack, I saw it. A single envelope with both my son's name and Melissa's printed together. I slid it out, heart pounding. There it was, the one paper that could destroy them both. I held that envelope like it was a live wire. My hands trembled, but not from age, from knowing the truth was no longer a rumor. It was ink on paper. Proof. That night, I waited. I wanted to look into my son's eyes before I decided what to do. So when he came by the rented room to drop off a few boxes I'd left behind, I saw my chance. "David," I said softly, "can we talk?" He shifted uneasily, already glancing at his phone. "What about, Mom?" I held his gaze. "About Melissa. About the debts. About the letters." His head snapped up. For a moment, I saw the little boy I raised, the one who used to cry when he scraped his knee. But then it was gone. His jaw tightened. His lips curled into something I had never seen on his face before. Contempt. "You've been snooping," he said flatly. "No," I whispered. "I've been surviving. And I had to know if the woman you brought into this family is hiding something that could destroy you both." He laughed then. A short, sharp laugh that cut deeper than any curse. "Destroy us? Mom, you're the one clinging to the past. You had your time. Now it's mine. Melissa and I know what we're doing. You should worry about yourself." That laugh. Cold, hollow, cruel. It didn't belong to the boy I raised, and in that laugh, I realized my son was no longer mine. When you grow old, you learn the value of silence. Silence is sharper than any knife, more dangerous than any weapon. And that night, after my son's laugh cut me deeper than words ever could, I decided I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg. I would wait. The papers I had found became my weapon. I memorized every figure, every overdue balance, every creditor's name. I didn't wave them in their faces. No, I whispered them where it mattered. To neighbors at the market, to an old friend at church who worked at the bank, to a cousin who still spoke with the sheriff's office in Franklin County. It started as nothing more than seeds, small comments, half questions, raised eyebrows, and I knew how gossip worked in Ohio. It spread faster than any fire. Then I started planting doubts in Melissa herself. When she passed me at the store, I leaned in and said softly, "Not every letter stays hidden forever." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Enough. At home, I slipped a copy of one overdue bill under David's pile of unopened mail. I knew his temper. I knew he'd see it, confront her, and the cracks would widen on their own. That was the beauty of truth. You didn't have to force it. You only had to let it breathe. And once it did, it poisoned everything. I didn't need to fight them. I only needed to let their lies eat them alive. It began with whispers, then turned into open stares. The same friends Melissa used to flaunt her handbags to now cross the street when they saw her. The bank, the one she thought would protect her, stopped answering her calls. Her debts were no longer secrets. They were headlines in every kitchen, every pew, every corner of town. David came home one evening, his face red with shame, his voice raised in the kind of fury that no longer frightened me. Their front porch, once polished with pride, became littered with envelopes stamped in red ink. Past due, final notice, collection. I watched from my rented room across the street, the small window giving me a perfect view of their crumbling kingdom. Melissa's smiles had cracked. David's pride had turned into shouting fits. and the neighbors they once ruled over with arrogance now looked at them with pity. It should have felt like triumph. In a way, it did. My silence had done more than words ever could. I had shown them what it meant to bleed slowly in public. But that night, as I sat down on my narrow bed and finally allowed myself a long breath, the phone rang. And in that moment, I realized revenge doesn't come without a price. The call wasn't from a bank or a lawyer. It was from a teacher. My grandson had been sent home from school. When I rushed to meet him, I found him sitting on a bench outside the principal's office, shoulders small, face streaked with tears. He clutched his backpack as though it were the only safe place left in the world. "Grandma," he whispered, eyes swollen. "Why are they saying Daddy is a thief? Why are they laughing at me?" His voice shattered me. The cruelty of gossip had reached him too. Children, repeating what they overheard at home, had turned my grandson into a target. He was too young to understand debt, or fraud, or the rot behind his parents' smiles. All he knew was shame. I knelt in front of him, my hands trembling as I cupped his face. He looked at me with the same eyes I once looked into when his father was a boy, back when love had not yet turned into betrayal. And in that moment, my revenge tasted bitter. I had wanted to watch them suffer, to see their pride stripped away. But staring into my grandson's tears, I realized he was paying a price he never owed. Looking at his tears, I asked myself, had I gone too far? I sat by the window that night, the lamp casting shadows on the walls of my small room. My grandson's face lingered before me, his tears, his confusion, his questions I could not answer. Revenge had burned hot in my chest for weeks. It had carried me through nights of loneliness and shame, but now it left me hollow, empty. I asked myself, "Child," and I ask you now, do you think revenge ever heals a wound? Or does it only pass the pain forward, from one heart to the next? I thought of the years I had worked, the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had gone hungry so my son could eat. Was this what it all came to? A family broken, a boy scarred, a mother questioning if justice was worth the cost. And yet, even in my guilt, I knew one truth. Pain is a teacher. It strips away pride, exposes lies, and forces wisdom into our bones. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Forgive, but do not forget. Protect the innocent, but never again be blind." I thought I had reached the end of the story, that my lesson had been carved deep enough. But fate wasn't done with me yet. The town hall was full that evening. Neighbors, family, even the pastor who had prayed over our family dinners years ago. They had gathered for the charity auction, a perfect place for masks to crack. I walked in quietly, no longer the cast-out mother, but the woman who carried the truth like a blade hidden in her shawl. My son stood on the stage, smiling with the same charm I once mistook for innocence. Beside him, my daughter-in-law clutched his arm, her diamonds catching the light. They looked untouchable, proud, untouchable, until I spoke. "Before you give them your trust," I said, my voice carrying across the hall, "ask them what they've done with the trust they already stole." A hush fell. I pulled the folded papers from my bag, the debts, the fraud, the signatures that tied them to every lie. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered first. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. Whispers began to rise, then gasps, then silence sharp enough to cut. And then my son, my own flesh and blood, turned on her. "You told me it was under control," he hissed, his mask slipping in front of everyone. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, and it tasted sweeter than I'll ever admit. The papers hit harder than any blow. Whispers turned to judgment, judgment to anger. By the end of that night, my daughter-in-law's empire of charm and deception had crumbled into dust. The banks came first, then the lawyers, then the neighbors who once lined up to praise her parties. No one stood by her side. The debts she had buried deep rose like graves dug open, swallowing her pride whole. And my son, the man I once carried in my arms, found himself stripped of the one thing he prized most, his standing. The community that had once looked at him with admiration now turned their eyes away in shame. Every smile he gave them was met with silence. Every boast he once made hung heavy with ridicule. I watched them both fall, not with rage, but with the quiet satisfaction of truth finally having its day. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it's the silence after the storm, when the liars have nothing left to say. And as I walked away from their ruined empire, I knew one last truth still had to be told. When I look back now, I see more than betrayal. I see the years I gave, the sacrifices I made, and the truth that family doesn't always mean loyalty. They thought casting me out would silence me. They thought age made me weak, that love made me blind. But wisdom does not fade with years. It sharpens. It waits. And when the time is right, it speaks louder than revenge ever could. I did not fight with fists. I did not scream. I let truth do the work, and truth is a blade that cuts deeper than hate. To you listening now, remember this. Blood ties can betray you, but your strength is yours alone. Do not measure your worth by the people who abandon you. Measure it by how you rise when they do. They thought throwing me out would break me. Instead, it made me stronger. But life teaches us that wisdom is sharper than any knife. Betrayal may wound your heart, but it also reveals who truly belongs at your table. Now tell me, would you forgive, or would you let justice speak for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every word. And if this story gripped you, don't leave yet. My next story is darker and closer to home than you think. So, subscribe, like, and share, because you won't want to miss what comes next.